Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into a question that literally every single business owner has to face. When is the right time to hire more people versus, buy new equipment? If you get this wrong, you can waste a ton of money. But if you get it right, well, that's the secret sauce to smart growth.
I mean, it's the ultimate puzzle, right? You want to boost production, you want to get bigger, but every single decision, spending on a new employee, investing in a new machine, it feels like a huge gamble. So how do you actually grow without just throwing money at the problem and hoping for the best?
To make this all feel a bit more real, let's follow the story of a small business owner named Priya. She is fantastic at what she does. Her t-shirts are flying off the shelves, but she's hit a wall. She simply cannot make them fast enough. Her challenge is going to be our focus today.
Okay, so Priya's puzzle is one that businesses face everywhere. When demand is suddenly booming, what is the smartest move you can make? Do you hire more people or do you invest in more machines? The answer, it turns out, lies in this really powerful economic tool that acts like a recipe for her entire business. That answer lies in something called her production function. Now, I know it sounds super technical, but just think of it as the secret recipe for her shop. It shows her the absolute maximum number of t-shirts she can make with any combination of her inputs, in this case, her workers and her printing machines. Now, economists like to look at this puzzle in two different time frames. You've got the short run, where some of your inputs are just fixed. Think about Priya's workshop size, or the number of machines she has. She can't change those overnight. Then you have the long run, where everything is on the table. She can get a bigger space, more machines, the whole shebang. So let's start with Priya's immediate problem, the short run.
In the short run, the only move Priya can really make is to hire more workers to use the machines she already has. So let's see what happens as her workshop starts to get, well, a little more crowded.
So when Priya hires her first worker, and then her second, her output just explodes. They can specialize, right? One person preps the shirts, the other runs the press. Just look at the graph. See how that total product curve shoots straight up? This is like the honeymoon phase of hiring. But then, look what happens. The curve on the left starts to flatten out. And the graph on the right tells us exactly why. That line labeled MP, which stands for marginal product, shows the extra output you get from each new worker. You can see it peaks, and then it starts to fall. This is the bumping elbows phase, where people are literally waiting around for a machine to free up.
A great way to think about this is like your grades in school. If your average grade is a B, and on the next test, your marginal score, you get an A, your overall average goes up. But if you get a C, your average gets dragged down. It is exactly the same thing here. As long as a new hire produces more than the team's average, they lift everybody up. But the moment they don't, the whole team's average productivity starts to slide.
And this brings us to a fundamental law in economics, the law of diminishing marginal returns. And it's really important to get this. It's not that the new workers are lazy or bad at their jobs. It's just that you're adding more and more people to the same fixed number of machines. You're spreading your resources way too thin. So we can see that in the short run, just throwing more workers at the problem eventually hits a wall. But what about the long run? What happens when Priya can change everything? Not just the number of workers, but the number of machines too. Well, this opens up a whole new world of choices. Okay, this is where a really cool tool called an isoquant comes into play. Let's break that down. Iso just means equal, and quant means quantity. So an isoquant is simply a curve that shows you all the different recipes of inputs that will produce the exact same amount of output. Take a look at this. To produce, say, 5,000 t-shirts, Priya has options. She could use a capital-intensive recipe, which means lots of expensive machines and just a few workers to run them. Or she could go labor-intensive, more people and fewer machines. Every single point along this curve represents a different recipe that still gets her to exactly 5,000 shirts. So you can imagine we can draw a whole map of these curves, where each one represents an even higher production target, 10,000 shirts, 15,000, and so on. Now, obviously, Priya wants to get on the highest, most ambitious curve possible. But the real question is, which recipe can she actually afford? Priya's got this map of all the possibilities, right? But she doesn't have a blank check. So to find the absolute best, most efficient path for her, we need to bring in the reality of her budget. To do that, we introduce her budget line. In economics, this is called an ISO cost line. And there's that word again, ISO, for equal. So equal cost. This line represents every combination of workers and machines she can possibly afford for one specific budget. This straight line shows the trade-off she has to make. If she spends her entire budget on machines, she's up there at point A. If she spends it all on hiring workers, she's over at point B. Or she can pick any mix in between. But every single point on this line costs her the exact same amount of money.
And here it is. This is the big aha moment. When we lay her straight budget line over her curved production map, we find the sweet spot. See that point Q right there? That's where her budget line just kisses the highest possible production curve she can reach. Any other point on her budget line is actually on a lower curve, which would mean making fewer t-shirts for the same money. Point Q is the most efficient mix of labor and capital she can possibly get.
So here's the crucial point. A business is running at its absolute peak efficiency when the bang for its buck is equal for every single input. At that magical point Q, the extra output Priya gets from spending $1 more on workers is exactly the same as the extra output she'd get from spending $1 more on machines. That is the perfect balance you're always searching for. Okay, so Priya has found her perfect recipe for her current budget. But what happens when she's ready to double that budget, when she's ready to really grow the business?
Well, this brings us to our final concept, returns to scale. And it asks a really simple question. If you double all of your inputs, workers, machines, everything, what happens to your output? You might see constant returns, where doubling your inputs exactly doubles your output. Pretty straightforward. Or you might get increasing returns, where doubling inputs more than doubles output. Think about how an assembly line gets way more efficient. Or you could get so big and tangled up in bureaucracy that you see decreasing returns, where doubling your inputs gives you less than double the output. So after this whole tour of production theory, what's the big takeaway here? What does this mean for Priya, and really for anyone trying to grow a business?
Look, this is not just some theory for a textbook. Understanding your production function is an incredibly powerful, practical framework. It helps you decide when to hire, when to invest in new gear, and how to scale your operations in the smartest, most efficient way possible. It ensures you're not just getting bigger, but you're actually getting better. And that leaves us with one final thought. We are living in an age where capital, things like software, automation, and AI, is becoming exponentially more powerful and, in many cases, cheaper. So how is that going to change the sweet spot, that optimal recipe for businesses everywhere? Definitely something to think about.